it should be Bazooka Joe, but that won't be on this show with Dylan Wade.
No, we are not going to be talking about Bazooka Joe, though that does sound fun. Today we're on Popcorn Politics. We're actually going to be talking about Man of Steel. It's one of my favorite movies. It introduced me to filmmaking, really. I had seen a lot of movies beforehand, but Man of Steel was sort of that movie where I realized what could be done with the medium and really opened my imagination up to it. So this is a really special movie to me, and joining me to talk about it is my friend Daniel Louis Crumpton. Dan, thanks for joining us. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
How's your apocalypse going, man?
It's going well. I'm hiding indoors. How's it going for you?
This is the
sky fallen yet?
Best apocalypse ever. I mean, the last apocalypse I went through was balls. This one is a pretty good apocalypse.
Yeah, this is kind of a relaxed one.
Yeah, everybody's losing their minds out there that we were trying to warn, 5 or 6 years ago about this type of thing. And now it's like they're all losing their minds. And for whatever reason, the solution is toilet paper. And then they're coming to me and people like me. And they're like, how are you guys? How do you do this? How do you do this? And we're like, don't ask us anything. We tried to tell you way back when. So
what do you mean? How do we deal with isolation? We're introverts.
I don't want to talk about it. I know I brought it up, but I really don't want to go there, dude.
Good.
I really don't want to go there.
I didn't want to go there either.
But the apocalypse is pretty snappy. It's pretty jazzy. Digging this one. Really, really digging this one.
But do you dig it like you dig Man of Steel?
Oh, that was a ham-fisted segue, bro.
It was.
Ham-fisted segue.
But you gave me nothing else to work with.
Rewind that one. Okay, let me try to do a better segue. So, Dylan, Man of Steel. Okay, yeah, Man of Steel, dude. We were talking about this a little bit, last night?
Yes.
Yeah, because you wanted to do this whole phony radio show thing where we talk about it before and then we go on live air and then we act like it's the first time that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
And me and you were pretending that we're in studios, but we're actually in our bedrooms with our pajamas on. I didn't mean to curse on Shelly's network, but I caught myself, so it's cool. You don't have to bleep it out or anything. So we discussed it last night, right? Man of Steel. Didn't really care for Superman before Man of Steel. Didn't really care for Superman, the character, and everybody knows I'm a comic book guy. But you got a character that's just super powered, and his arch nemesis is a real estate mogul, right? So it's like, it's not much of a story there, so I never really read him. But when the trailer for Man of Steel came out in, what year did it come out, Dylan?
2013.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, man, dude.
It's been it feels like it's been a long time.
No, it doesn't. Not for me.
For me, it does.
Yeah, you're a young squirt, so time works different for you. Anyhow.
Don't say that with such disdain.
But no, yeah, like when the first trailer came out for Man of Steel, I was like, this is going to be interesting. And it was the way that it was shot, the way that Zack Snyder was. I kind of knew what he was trying to put into iconography. You know what I mean? In combination with the music of those first three trailers, where I was like, this is going to be something special. And I don't even care for that character too much, right?
Yeah.
And I'm more of a Marvel guy. I am a DC guy like Batman and, a couple other ones, but I'm more of a Marvel guy. And so when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, yeah, this would be pretty neat. And, of course, when I saw it, that's what converted me to be a Superman fan, was Man of Steel, and I think that there is a lot in that movie that we can unpack that I think that most moviegoers probably didn't catch and may catch it on a second or third go-around after they listen to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I do want to try to give my general impressions as well. I don't want to get too deep without that.
Nobody wants to hear that crap. No, I'm just going. Go ahead.
So I wasn't a big Superman fan either. But what this movie did was it sort of took the traditional idea of Superman that I had, and it modernized it without betraying the core concept, which I've heard some debate around, and I do want to get to that. But what I really appreciated about Man of Steel was it wasn't, unlike Marvel films, which I'm also more of a Marvel guy, which are more about the external conflict. Man of Steel really isn't. I mean, sure, you have Zod, and you have his soldiers, and you have the World Engine, but the bulk of Superman's plot, or Man of Steel's plot, is about this alien trying to find a way to live in human society. And is Earth ready for that? Is humanity ready for that? And that's sort of a theme that carries through into Batman versus Superman. I think I do want to get to that at a later date, but Batman versus Superman is the natural conclusion to what Man of Steel began. And what Man of Steel began is sort of this question. And I really appreciated the question. I really appreciated the shades of gray that they gave to Superman, which he never had in previous films.
Give me an example of what you mean with the shades of gray.
Like, the obvious one is the snapping of Zod's neck. That's not really a shade of gray in my mind.
Should we say spoiler alert, or did everybody already see this? Can we take a
wait. I mean, it's
is that proper etiquette?
I just have a blanket spoiler warning across all of these
right.
Because it's hard to go an hour without getting into spoilers.
Okay, all right. Yeah, just saying.
Yeah,
people
fair enough.
He snaps his neck. Oh my god!
Spoiler alert, guys! Spoiler alert.
All right, so he snaps his neck, and that's a shade of gray, in your opinion?
No, it's a shade of gray that the movie tries to...
I would have snapped that dude's neck back in Kansas when he touched my mom, man. Just saying.
No, and I agree. I think it's completely justified. But they do, and I think the more interesting shade of gray is in the conversation that takes place in the first act between young Clark and Jonathan Kent, where after Clark saves the bus full of kids, his dad says, "You shouldn't have done that.
Maybe you should have let him die.
Maybe you should have let them die."
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's not really a shade of gray on Superman, but it is a twist on the general understanding of what Superman's supposed to be. In previous mythologies, Jonathan Kent never would have said that.
I mean, I don't know, because I really, like I said before, Man of Steel, I wasn't a huge Superman fan, but I think that like that scene, you could see on Kevin Costner's face, or the character, you could see that he's looking at his son, and he's like, as his earthly father, he's like, I don't know, dude, I don't know what would have been right. Should you have let them die or not? I don't know.
Right.
So it's like he's not giving his son or force feeding him or spoon feeding him a set of moralities or morals and imposing them on him, because he's basically giving an example that, hey, I don't have all the answers, man, and I'm your dad, and I don't know what would have been right. So
no, and I didn't mean to make it sound like that's what was happening. If yes, I did.
This interview's over.
Of course, bye, Dan.
Later. No, go ahead.
No, but I think the really interesting shade of gray with Superman comes in during the tornado sequence, because he could have saved his dad, and I understand what the scene was trying to convey, and I like what the scene was trying to convey, and I think the scene worked.
Better than a heart attack. Better than
a heart attack. I get what the heart attack was supposed to do, but I actually like this more. And I think it's an undeniable shade of gray, him letting his dad be taken by the hurricane so that he wouldn't be exposed. Yes, his dad told him to, but it's an interesting shade of gray, I think.
Well, I think maybe you and I are speaking two different languages, because when you say shade of gray, I think Machiavellianism.
Oh, no.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean moral ambiguity.
I might give you a poker chip on that one. I would say it's being human and not having all the
Yeah.
answers, and being stuck between rocks and hard places of morality of do you do the thing that you want to do or what is required of you? I don't know.
But that's exactly my point. The human sort of morality that they interject is not what's previously been done with the character. The character has always been this sort of, and we're going to get into this because this is directly tied into a line of dialogue that Jor-El gives, but Superman has always been held up as an example of what human morality should be. And to humanize Superman and give him an actual moral ambiguity, I think was a brilliant choice.
Yeah, to show that an individual with exceptional abilities still has frailties and still has vulnerabilities, and we discussed this in our pre-interview about the idea of organized religion getting the collective consciousness to focus on one savior figure or another that's going to clean everything up for you and save you and do it all for you, and you don't have to do anything, and that he's flawless and has all the answers. And really no scripture that I know of really depicts their messiahs that way. But Zack Snyder, and we talked about this a lot, and we'll talk about it extensively. There's a lot. Hollywood right now is doing a lot of solar messiah symbology. Most movies are very, very subtle about this solar messiah thing. And you really got to know your hero's journey and Carl Jung and all that to really pick it apart. But what I found wonderful about Zack Snyder is he wasn't trying to hide what he was saying with the solar messiah myth at all. If you didn't get that comparison in the first 20 minutes of the movie, you just didn't get it. So it does beg the question, what is the agenda of these filmmakers in doing that? And when I say that, let me dog-ear that. For all these conspiracy theorist nutballs who are they live underneath their desk afraid of everything, not saying that some conspiracies aren't true. There are a lot that are true. And even if all of them are true, especially the worst ones are true, what are you going to do with that? I mean, are you going to live in terror or just faint and fawn and not do anything? Or are you just going to kind of go, oh, well, that's going on, and I can either do something about it or not, or I can just go on with my life and be happy. So it's like, to those cats, this is mind control. It's government mind control. They're using Hollywood to program us. But it's like, for people who are a little bit more aware, it's the exact opposite. It's actually the collective consciousness coming out through art, through creators, whether it be music or film or whatever, and it's coming out on the screen. And so it's like a feedback loop of the collective consciousness. And so Superman or Man of Steel is really shoving that in our face. It's like really trying to get us to pay attention to this solar messiah myth. And what it's doing in opposition to organized religion is it's taking Clark Kent or, Cal, and showing that he questions himself. He doesn't have all the answers, and as powerful as he is and fast as he is, he can't do it all on his own. And he needs help, that he's a little bit human, and we got to take part too. So I don't know if you asked me a question because I just went off like around the lake, but I'm going to assume that you asked me a question, and I'm going to assume that somewhere in all that dialogue that I just shot out of my lips, that it answered your question, and then I'm going to say back to you, Dylan.
So,
it was witty, and you're going to say, wow, Daniel, that was a profound answer to a question I did not ask you.
Wow, Daniel, that was a profound answer to a question I didn't ask you.
Oh, I know, right?
But I do want to hit on something you mentioned. The idea that Superman is the Messiah that doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I like that idea, and I think it's a particularly relevant idea, and it's something that they didn't do with Superman previously. He was always this icon, and I think you could still make the argument, even in Man of Steel, he's portrayed that way, but he's portrayed much less perfect, and I like that a lot. And I want to get to, I think, the the character that has the most influence on the sides of him that make him sort of that Messiah type icon, and that's Jor-El.
Yeah.
Jor-El played brilliantly by Russell Crowe.
Brilliantly.
Yes.
Russell Crowe, he just seems like he would be a cool dude to hang out with.
Yeah.
That's a cool guy.
We've talked about him a lot lately. He was in Gladiator as well, which is another film we talked about. But Jor-El has a bigger part in this movie than I think he does in any others.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wade. I'm looking in the chat right now, and I see that there is an anonymous chatter that said, "Is Russell Crowe God in this paradigm?" Yes, anonymous chatter. Chatter or chatty? Chatter.
Either works. Chatty.
Yes, person who I will not name, which happens to be Chuck O'Celli. Russell Crowe is the heavenly father, and Kevin Costner is the earthly father, i.e. Joseph, who sticks around for the first part, but he's not in the follow-up. So I hope that answers your question, anonymous chatter. By the way, that is Chuck in there in chat doing that. Fair enough, he says. I just want to say, it's Chuck's birthday today, if I'm correct, or is the LSD still hadn't worn off and I'm still back in last Wednesday? Don't know.
No,
Chuck,
you are correct.
Okay. I just want to say happy birthday to Chuck, for one. I know we're talking about Man of Steel, and Chuck is by far one of the greatest men of steel that I know. And I want to say happy birthday to you. He's a very good friend of all of ours, and he's a hardest working guy that does this thing. And what's more important than that is that he is for real. You know, he's a real, like what you hear on O'Celli's stuff, that's Chuck. And I want to say right now, I'm proud of Chuck for everything that he's accomplished in the few years that we've known each other. And he's a family to me, no doubt. And I just want to say happy birthday to you, dude. And your network is going to grow and everything's going to line up into place, man, because you're an awesome dude. Love you, brother. Happy birthday. And on my world, it means hope.
That's another line I want to get to as well. But yes.
Nah, let's not.
We can at some point.
All right.
We were talking about where were we? Russell Crowe, right?
Yeah, sure.
Jor-El.
I got a little notepad in front of me with some bullet points. We could just do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, man.
Bullet points on Russell Crowe.
Yeah, let's start at the top of the movie for one thing. And kind of break it down. And we can get into the spiritual and the political and whatever. But look,
it's the movie as you can, though. We don't want to get too far out there.
Not too far out there. I'm not trying to, invite Bigfoot over to my house to have some tea and crumpets, because whatever.
We can do that on another show, though.
Another day, we'll review Harry and the Hendersons, because that's about as Sasquatch as I get. Yeah, me and you were talking about this, and it's like, all right, let's start picking this stuff apart right from the top of the movie. What is it trying to say? All right, so we open up on Krypton, right? Super duper advanced civilization that used to be spacefaring, and for whatever reason they've chosen to become isolationists. Okay, this is not too cool, and we start to see three major issues. And the first major issue is that these cats have built their society off of eugenics. And I don't think it gives an exact amount of time, but the society went from natural birth, natural evolution to now we're going to test tube grow all of the Kryptonians and hardwire into their DNA whatever it is that they're supposed to be in our caste system. So Krypton's built on that. Sound a little familiar, Dylan? Sounds like... So that's an issue. And we, as the viewers, we already know Krypton's going to blow up. So it's like in rapid-fire succession in the very beginning of the movie, it's like, hey, this is what leads to an apocalypse. First, eugenics. Okay. And the second part that we have is, this whole idea of you have a Senate, which kind of resembles the last shred, hanging by a shred republic that could have possibly been there. And then, we got Jor-El's warning these cats, hey, guys, probably wasn't a really, really good idea to rape our planet of its natural resources. Like stuff that's inside the planet that makes the planet go, we probably shouldn't drain the core. So now you have the second big problem that leads to an apocalypse, which is the raping of Mother Earth, Krypton, of its natural resources or fossil fuels. because we know there's a better way, Tesla.
So, I do want to talk about the rest.
Good. I got to take a bong rip, so go ahead.
Okay.
Brought by CannaSense Total Wellness. Just saying.
But I want to hit on the eugenics point.
Go ahead.
And
I give you permission on your show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I don't want to let this get by us because I know it would otherwise. I want to talk about sort of what the idea of the eugenics means for Superman, given that he's in this story, the first natural birth on Krypton.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just sort of go into how that informs the rest of his character in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, and fast forwarding later to when Zod tells him, I was basically, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't, burn me at the stake. He didn't quote it exactly correct. But whenever, the conclusion of the movie or whatever, Zod's like, I was basically born and I was genetically created for one mission and one mission only, and you took that from me. So it would indicate that if you have a society that's based off of eugenics where everyone is genetically, designed, that there is an element of free will that is stripped from that entity. Because Zod knows nothing else but to be this general that is supposed to just fucking be really... He's got anger issues. He's got anger issues. That guy, Zod's a little mad about stuff. I don't know if it's childhood trauma, maybe daddy, mommy issues. No, it's not. It's his genetics. And
yeah,
that's what happens
he was bred to be a conqueror.
Yeah, sure. And so it's like, okay, which it's like, all right, well, there's a certain amount of free will he doesn't have. So in the act of Jor-El and Laura having a natural-born child, that programming is not there for Cal. And so Cal has free will. He has free will to determine. And, of course, later, Jonathan Kent says, one day you're going to have to choose what kind of man you want to be. So it would indicate that the Kryptonians or genetically designed mofos don't have that ability to actually choose if they're going to be a beacon of hope or a tyrant that is willing to commit genocide. So that's the danger of eugenics.
And that's a good segue, actually, into...
Hold your potatoes.
No more... Okay, no segue.
Okay, hold your potatoes, because I also want to point out that, one of the discussions early with Jor-El and Zod is, I will make sure, in his very angry voice, the pure bloodline survive, or he probably says it the opposite way. I'll purge Krypton of the inferior genetic bloodlines, and Jor-El says, and who's going to decide which ones are superior or inferior? You? How? You know what I mean? So that's the danger of eugenics too, is that when you start tweaking with eugenics, it breeds superiority complex, and I'm better than you, and you're an NPC, therefore, you know what I mean? Things like this. You're a Jew, you're black, you're white, you're Irish, your bloodline is just pathetic. It's beneath me, crap like that. We've seen it before. So I think that's screaming in the face on the topic of eugenics in that scene.
Yes. But you still haven't closed my segue. I'm going to take it now, Daniel. I want to talk about...
I just came here to be unprofessional. That's all.
I know. I appreciate it.
I'm doing laundry right now, doing bong rips on a radio show. Give me a break. You know that scene from Scarface where he's like behind the desk with a bunch of cocaine?
Never seen Scarface.
Oh, you loser.
I know.
Douchebag. Anyway, you know the picture. That's me right now, but with cannabis. I'm sitting behind a desk with a mountain of cannabis.
All right.
Say hello to the friend. Okay, I reloaded.
So, General Zod.
Get this back on track, Dylan. This is your...
I'm trying. You're very difficult.
You're having a good time, you know.
I am.
All right.
No, General Zod is sort of this... I think he's arguably the central character. He's the one who goes through almost more emotional turmoil than Superman does. And what I really... We touched on his major arc.
He needs therapy.
He does. He needs therapy. But there is something interesting about his almost single-minded focus, and he was already broken. But when he realizes Krypton can't be restored after Clark destroys the world engine, his almost breakdown, like his complete and utter just breakdown, there's no other better word, is fascinating to watch. And Michael Shannon, he doesn't play the role with any sort of subtlety, and he's having a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, he dials it to 11 for sure.
He does, but
in some places, I got to say, it was
nuance.
a little. Yeah, in some places it was unnecessary. Like, did you really have to say, "I will find him" 3 times? Give me a break.
It was only 3.
I don't know, but I think, but the second time I was like, "You're done. That you will find him. We get it. She's intimidated, and so are we." But then, like, he pauses, and like a vein kind of comes up in his head. He's like, "I will find him," and then he gets wrapped up in whatever.
Yes,
and,
but Zod, the sort of central conflict, in my opinion, in the movie, the internal conflict, rather, is choice versus determinism. And that is perfectly represented in Clark and Zod, as you mentioned earlier.
I don't know. He's a bad guy. He's a butthole. Yeah, he's like the Antichrist. But let's get back to the 3 things.
But you can understand him, though.
Sure, but you're going way too far. We're going back to the destruction of a society. What causes it, remember? We were going to name 3. We only got 2, Dylan.
I know.
Okay.
I like to get off track.
No, let's get back to it, because the 3rd one's really important, especially right now. So if you want to do that, Dylan?
All right, Daniel. Go have your fun.
So, okay. Yeah, so you get back to it. What do you got? You got the apocalypse. We know what's about to happen. It's happening in rapid fire in the first couple of sequences there. And 1, it's you have a civilization based off eugenics. 2, you're raping the planet of its natural resources. And then 3 gets back to Zod, which is blowing away the Republic or the Senate and then declaring martial law.
Yes, Zod, at the beginning of the movie, does kill all the senators and sort of claim the planet's governing system for himself. His pretext is they led us to ruin. Somebody has to step in and get us back on track. Obviously, it was sort of too late by that point.
Right. And so, I mean, I think that what we're being told on a serious note, I mean, in all seriousness, is we're being screamed at by this art form. Guys, this planet's about to blow up, and you already know that. And here are 3 things that you probably want to pay attention to in your reality of the Uberverse. Those 3 things, which, if anybody who's been paying attention to what's going on right now in the world, it's a little eerily similar to me.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what the movie was getting at, but
it's what it was getting at.
An
I called
obvious
Zack Snyder.
parallel.
Zack Snyder said, "You're right. I didn't even know that, Daniel. You're right." So
If you have a direct line to Zack Snyder, why am I not interviewing him and interviewing you instead?
oh, that was colder than the other side of the pillow.
I know, right?
So cold. 2 points on Dylan. All right, butthole. Get back to it. So anyway, but yeah, I think those 3 points are something that, I mean, I was told, I met with a wise philosopher known as Avery Brooks, who plays Captain Sisko on Star Trek Deep Space Nine years ago, and I had discussed with him the fact that the entire show of Deep Space Nine, which ended in like 1999, if you actually take the allegories out of it or the symbolism out of it,
Don't spoil it.
I'm gonna.
I haven't seen it. It's on my list. Don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it. This statement won't spoil it. But the entire series of Deep Space Nine actually forecasts almost identical what happened to the United States of America after 9/11, almost exactly. And when I met with Avery Brooks, who is a very deep philosopher, very deep man, that man's from a different dimension. But I asked him that. I said, "Hey, Mr. Brooks, did you ever find it odd that your show predicted false flag terrorism, occupation of other lands, the suspension of civil rights, and there could be a terrorist boogeyman anywhere and everywhere at any time?" And Avery Brooks, to his credit, was like, he gave me a very long monologue about how, is it true that art imitates life, or is it the other way around? And is our art perhaps the collective unconsciousness, which is not bound by time, trying to warn us from the future, so that maybe we can make a change here, and it comes out in our art. And so you have your tinfoil hat wearers that are like, it's predictive programming. It's like, is it predictive programming, or is it a warning?
Or is it just art?
Or is it art? But where does art come from, Dylan? It comes from the human spirit, which is we're all one, and Alan Watts is right, and all that good stuff. But anyway,
regardless, we're getting a little away from the movie.
You asked me to come on your show.
I know. I should have known.
And you know me. So let's get back to the movie.
So, all right, back to the movie. I want to get back to the discussion about Zod and free will and how that is, in my opinion, at least the central conflict of the movie. I didn't get your opinion on it before. Do you agree with that assessment, that that's sort of the conflict that they want us to focus on?
I think it's one of them. I think there's a lot of things they want us to focus on, but the idea of showing us two different poles, which is, free will versus pre-programmed determination of a destiny. It's a yin yang thing. I think it was obvious. You got Man of Steel wearing bright colors, and you have Zod wearing very black colors. It's a message of duality, and that back and forth between free will and is it ethical to let one race go extinct to give another race a shot? Which there's also a very something interesting with that too, about the human race and the Kryptonians, but we can get to that in a minute. But yeah, I think that's one of the main focuses is the idea of free will and the cross that comes with free will, with being in situations of moral dilemma where you have the weight of the world on your shoulders either way that you decide. Something, you're going to lose something no matter what decision you make. And It's like putting that on a scale. And I think that Kal-El, I think that it was shown on the screen very well in his face. He did a really good job to show, especially when he would furrow his brow. It was like, this guy's really stuck between a rock and a hard place on what is the right thing to do. What is the most noble thing to do? He struggles with it. Zod doesn't really so much struggle with morality. And like his little boo, the little short-haired boo, she was, that statement that she says about you have a moral code and that's your failing, because evolution doesn't have a moral code and evolution always wins. Where she's basically doing that genetically superior, snooty, look down your nose, oh, you have compassion for these inferior people. You know what I mean? And
yeah, and it is sort of an elitist look.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes with the territory of how they were bred. Of course they believe that. They were bred to believe they are the ultimate conquerors. They were bred to be the ultimate conquerors. Of course they have a superiority complex.
Right.
I
think whenever Jor-El was having that battle with Zod in the beginning, and he tells him, which I thought that was a little, that writing could have been a bit different, because typically like a James Bond villain will tell James Bond the plot of what he's trying to do. Like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go take over the Federal Reserve and show everybody that it's fake money and there's no gold in the Fort Knox over there or whatever. Then James Bond's like, oh, you just told me your entire plan. And then he gets away. It was on the opposite foot with this, because Jor-El is talking to Zod and he's like, we've had a man-child. I'm like, dude, why did you tell him that? Why did you tell him that, Russell? What's going on?
Well,
but that's just me.
I believe that the mythology is that Jor-El and Zod were friends, and that's why.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have said anything. I would have been like, let him. But anyway, I digress. That's not important. What's important is that whenever they're having that argument, and he says that's, Zod screams, that's heresy, and all that good stuff. Jor-El says, he's the first natural-born Kryptonian in thousands of years, and what that means is he's born free to forge his own destiny. Right?
Yes, and
that was a killer line right there.
Yeah, Jor-El has a lot of great lines. And the other big one is his whole they will stumble, they will fall, but eventually they'll join you in the sun.
Yeah, that right there in the trailer is what got me. It is what got me, because this is cool. It's saying that somehow or another, the idea that this kid who, and let's go ahead and I'll get it out of the way in a minute. But this kid who on Krypton would be just a normal kid in a different environment, under a different frequency and radiance of radiation, he's a god. Okay. And so when that line was said in the trailer, you'll be a symbol to them, and they'll race behind you, pushing to try to achieve what you are, and they're gonna screw up. They're gonna make mistakes. Be patient with them, because they will eventually join you in the sun. And to me, when I heard that, I was like, what he's saying is that humanity itself, Homo sapiens, us, man, our species, we have made so many mistakes, and we have stumbled so many times. We've screwed up a lot as a species, and and it is indicative of, like, the S. It's indicative of hope for our species, which is, if we keep striving, no matter how many times we fall and stumble, that eventually we all can become supermen and superwomen, right?
Yeah, I think it's fairly it's mostly a metaphor.
Well, I mean, within the movie, you mean?
Yes, I
don't think so.
I think the movie I think the movie is just trying to say they're fallible, but with you as a symbol, eventually they will strive to be better, and that will make them better.
I will condescendingly disagree with you, Mr. Wade.
Oh, of course you will.
And this is why. And I didn't notice this until you asked me to come on the show, and I rewatched the movie, and I caught something I'd never caught before. And I'm saying within the movie. Whenever Kal-El gets to the ship in Antarctica or wherever, they make a point to say that the ice around it is over 20,000 years old. So this Genesis Chamber ship from Krypton crashed on Earth 20,000 years ago. And whenever Kal-El's like walking through the ship, he sees basically a cryogenic freeze tank, and there's a dead skeleton of a Kryptonian in there. And he looks over his shoulder, and it only shows it for a second, but there's another cryogenic chamber that's open and empty. And so It's like, wait a second.
There actually is something to reference there.
Okay, shoot.
There was a comic that came out, a tie-in comic after the movie, where that was actually Kara Zor-El, Supergirl.
Really? In a comic?
Yes, there was a tie-in comic. I don't believe it was considered canon, but because of how the DCEU operates, I don't know what's considered canon at this point.
Right. Well, within the confines of just the movie Man of Steel, when I saw that, it was like, holy crap, a Kryptonian survived. Could that be our ancestor? And so that's why I don't think that the statement they will join you in the sun is an allegory or a parable that humans are fallible. I think that it's what it's kind of hinting at is, hey, transpermia, our great grandfather or Adam or whoever you want to know as the first genetic humanoid actually was a Kryptonian, and perhaps evolution took a different route, but that DNA, the Kryptonian DNA, is lying dormant in Homo sapien. So I think that when Jor-El says they'll stumble and they'll fall, but they will join you in the sun, I think that he's actually saying that DNA was going to be reactivated within humanity by its exposure to Kal-El. But that's just me. It's just me, man.
Yeah, I mean, we all see things differently. I still see it more as an allegory, but that is a good point about the open chamber. I know that comic wasn't created with Zack Snyder's consultation. So it could still be what you're saying. I
like my theory better because I came up with it.
But so the other big one, the other big sort of line, I guess, is that whole line from Zod at the end. I'm forgetting the exact line, but it was the one about the revival of Krypton. It was sort of his supervillain monologue.
Where he was like, Kal-El's like, well, what's going to happen to humanity? He's like, well, you got to build a foundation on something.
I want to use that as a segue to sort of dig into the mindset of the Kryptonians that came to Earth. Because we talked a lot already about Superman and Jor-El, and they're interesting, but I feel like we've kind of glossed over Zod a bit. And
dude, you're fixated with Zod, man. What's up with that?
like villains. Villains are very interesting.
All right.
Don't judge me. But I don't know. Honestly,
yes,
take this wherever you want to go with
this. Yeah. No, I mean, one of the things that I also dig was, speaking of, you get into the different, the symbolism and the hidden meanings in there. We talked about this last night. Let's all be adults here. You have the whole idea, because I'm going to get away from Zod for just a second, back to Kal-El, because I think we missed the whole scene at the beginning, where there's also something to be said about, there's a lot to be said about the fact that they put the baby in a vessel that looks like sperm. Let's just be honest. The little spaceship it's odd. Everything on Krypton is like dark gray, except for the ship that looks like sperm. And let's be adults here. Go back and watch the beginning of the movie. The compound that they shoot the ship with Kal-El out of, just go look at it and tell me it's not a phallus, because that's exactly what it is. And you can't tell me that millions of dollars were spent on this movie and graphic designers spent hours and hours designing that scene without going, that's a dick. You know what I mean? That looks like a dick. We screwed up. Nah, we'll just put it in the movie. No, they did that intentionally. So
I mean, there is an argument for that. Absolutely.
No, there's no argument. It's a pecker.
No, it is. But the only sort of
circumcised pecker, I may add.
The only sort of argument I would make against your point is this happens a lot in movies, and a lot of the time what it turns out to be is visual effects artists just having a bit of fun.
I don't think so. Not in this case.
I don't think it is in this case either, but it certainly is a plausible explanation.
I think it's saying, hey, look at ancient Egypt. Hey, look at obelisks. Won't you take a look at that?
I just think it's another allegory for birth and the getting into this whole solar messiah archetype with Man of Steel. I mean, and being adult here. Yeah, it represents the conception, whole process of conception. You have a messiah, which means oil, in a sperm ship, the sperm spaceship. It gets shot out of a phallus and it goes towards the egg of Earth, just like sperm would within a woman's womb. So you have all these different sperm racing to get to an egg, i.e. Earth, to be the one, the Neo, the Messiah, the Krishna, the Buddha, the Kal-El, okay, to create new life. And that whole sequence right there, if you look at it, when the capsule or the emergency ship leaves Krypton, shoots out of the shaft of the compound, and then it impregnates Mother Earth with a Messiah, and then the insinuation is that in that process, a whole bunch of other Messiahs will eventually follow in his wake. Time. We can tie that in with Batman versus Superman another day, but that is where it sort of goes.
Your mom's name's Martha, too. Ugh.
I will defend that scene forever.
I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was neat. Whatever. Everybody's a critic.
I will defend that scene forever one day.
Man of Steel, dude. So
Man of Steel.
Another thing I thought was cool was, like, we didn't need the whole origin story. The way that they did it was perfect. The way they cut it up into flashbacks. I thought that was really neat. Yeah.
I loved that. What I especially liked about the first act, I think the movie gets weaker as it goes, but that first act, man, it's a perfect origin story.
Right. it shows him as a vagabond on his way in the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And through that journey, it's showing you where he's from, where he comes from, which is another thing about messiahs is they don't know that they're messiahs when they're born. They have to grow into it and learn it. And I thought they did it beautifully with this film, where he has to go on a hero's journey and leave the normal world of Kansas and go become a fisher person. And this was something me and you noticed too, is the first quote unquote miracle that he performs is what, Dylan?
The oil rig?
The oil rig.
Yes.
The oil rig. Now, what is that saying? His home planet, unbeknownst to him, he didn't even know, was one of the main reasons it blew up was because they were raping the planet of natural resources. And the first quote unquote miracle that Zack Snyder chose to show us with Kal-El is at an oil rig where humanity is raping Mother Earth of its natural resources. And it's like,
yes.
Can
I want to highlight one other part of the first act that I thought was especially great. Kal-El in the closet with it, discovering his powers for the first time in a school. It's cinematically, it's one of the most breathtaking visuals in a comic book movie. It's so powerful, and it's not something any other Superman movie has done before, and I really appreciated it here. They never, ever show him struggling with his powers.
Right. And another thing that I think is really neat about the Man of Steel thing is, especially in today's culture, dude, I mean, I don't know. We are all the product. Most of us are products from my generation down a little bit. Most of us are products of broken marriages and broken families. So most people have seen their parents get divorced, and so they didn't have that thing. And I think that what makes Man of Steel separate is that he had very, very strong and sturdy parental figures, which is different from most every other superhero that I know.
Yes.
Batman's got parent issues, clearly.
But can I just make a point about that? I think that really ties into his whole he is the ideal. Because back when his character was created in the 30s, 40s, the nuclear family was sort of the ideal. And you could argue it is today, you could argue it isn't. I don't think that's especially interesting to argue, but he comes from a perfect family because that's the point.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's neat because most of the other superheroes and superhero movies and comic books, we see a lot of, like, for example, we said the other night, Iron Man, he's done some screwed up stuff. Spider-Man's messed up a lot. Captain America makes mistakes. Black Widow's got a checkered past. Clark Kent, and all of them have parent issues. Maybe I'm digging a little deep, but we look at Superman, and he's got this all-American Kansas love apple mom, apple mom and pie. Christ, apple mom and pie, apple pie and mom. He's all-American, and I think it's something to be said about two strong parental figures that make that up. But I will also say there's a lot of stuff that isn't said about Lois Lane that I would like to talk about, and it's this.
Just be mindful of we only have 10 minutes left. So
I'm looking at the clock.
Make it sure, Daniel.
11 minutes. 11 minutes.
Come on.
Chuck isn't going to. Chuck's not going to care if we go over. He ain't got nothing to say anyway. He's going to talk about coronavirus. Ain't you, Chuck?
Still, we shouldn't go over.
I'm gonna do a bong rip every time I hear coronavirus on Ocelli Effect tonight. All right.
So Lois Lane
or Trump. I'm gonna get high. No, I'm just messing with you.
Lois Lane.
I think that Zack Snyder did something brilliant with Lois Lane that most people it just has gone unnoticed, and it's no doubt we're getting inundated with a feminist agenda, and I don't mean the good kind of feminist. I mean some other kind of feminist agenda with all these other movies.
I don't know if I agree with that, but
you hold your potatoes and let me get my stuff out.
All right, go ahead.
Look, I got no problem with it, but it's like, dude, we get it. Girls have power. Nobody's saying you ain't got power, but come on, in Endgame, which I love, but it's like, what are the odds that all the main female characters are on the same spot in the battlefield to do a hero shot to be like girl power? Or, and I love Captain Marvel. I thought it was great, but I was like, okay.
I
what
want
I
to
mean?
talk about Captain Marvel at some point because that movie deserves a defense. It's a great movie.
Oh, no.
But Lois
It's a great
Lane.
movie. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. But I'm saying, look, Hollywood, we get it. Equality amongst the sexes, and I totally, totally agree. But we got to keep the seesaw balanced here, man. We got to keep those scales balanced because it's not like one's better than the other. We got to keep the masculine and the feminine balanced and equal in the same playing field. And so in all the Marvel movies, they're like superpowering all the females and making the females all superpowered. But you know what? In my opinion, I think that Lois Lane is actually one of the biggest feminist characters, respectable, that I've seen portrayed in Hollywood. And it's like, okay, she has no superpowers whatsoever. She's a human. But this woman is determined. She is strong. She's smart. She's a Nobel Prize winner. Is it a Nobel Prize winner or Pulitzer? I forget which one.
Pulitzer,
But
not Nobel.
She is the best there is at what she does. Okay, she does she does the best she can with what she's got. Right.
I actually, I agree with you about her character, but I actually think she's better served in Batman versus Superman. I disagree here. I don't think she's served very well.
I think she's served great because it's like this. It's like, for one, she's the first person to believe in him. Okay, because she's done her research. So there's that, and then there's, one, they're in love. We know that's like the big love story is Lois Lane and Clark Kent, and how's that work between a Kryptonian and a human? And obviously when you have all these abilities, you're going to attract to you. I mean, superheroes must attract what?
I'm not sure where you're going.
I mean, if you're a superhero, like they say in the Marvel movies, their very power invites challenge. So superheroes are always attracting supervillains. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't sure where you were going with that. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's what superheroes are for, is to balance the light with the dark entities that are out there, the supervillains. So, one, she knows this. She's aware of this. She can see this, but she still is committed to standing by him, right?
Yes.
No matter what.
She served well here. I see her filling sort of that generic love interest role in this movie.
I think you're wrong.
I mean, I don't know. That's just how I saw her in this movie. I think she's actually given much more to do in Batman versus Superman, and I think a much better role.
I think that the very fact that when she's up on the ship, when she voluntarily, whenever they want to take Kal-El prisoner, she volunteers to go with him. She's like, it's okay, yes. I'll go. And I find it interesting that when she's up on the ship, Jor-El's consciousness in that crystal chooses to speak to her and give her the solution, so that Kal-El and Lois Lane, or Kal and Lois Lane, are forced to work together. It's almost like the consciousness of Cal's dad knew that the only way that Cal was going to be able to really save her and the world was if they trusted each other and each of them worked their own abilities in their own areas. Because while Cape Boy is fighting the World Engine, the thing he's doing down in the Indian Ocean can't work unless what Lois and the generals, the humans, are doing up in Metropolis. They both have to work together. So I don't think in this movie she's just a generic thing. I think it's showing that. I think, like I said, I think it's a very strong image for a strong woman, in my opinion.
So I do agree that's an important moment, and that she's given quite a bit to do there. But my every point you mentioned is valid. But what I would say to the idea that she's sort of this independent character who has more to do. All of her storylines, and I understand why this is, she's a secondary character. Everything she has to do in this movie is because of something that was done by Kal-El. Everything she does is a reaction, and I think it's still good. She's not bad in this movie by any stretch. I just don't think she's serving any function that is particularly different from, say, a Gwen Stacy in the Amazing Spider-Man series. But I digress. We have to wrap up in a minute. I want to give you the last word. Your overall impressions of the movie, anywhere people can find you.
Oh yeah, man. I think it was one. It was cinematically beautiful. The music, the score was beautiful. I mean, whenever
Yes.
I need a lot of motivation, I'll put that score on or I'll watch that movie, and I'll especially like there's a lot of motivational like lyrical videos where you can just pull up Man of Steel score, and when you got to overcome something that's really good. I think it's an inspirational movie. I think like we said the other night. I wish that when they were trying to do the DC multiverse or whatever, they would have taken the foundation, which was Man of Steel, and appropriately built upon it. Now, I don't know what happened. They dropped the ball because Aquaman, in my opinion, was the biggest ball of fecal matter. I'm sorry, it's just crap.
I haven't seen Aquaman.
It was crap, dude. It was like I don't know. It was like the Little Mermaid with some steroids, something.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So, where can people find you? I just want to get that
Georgia,
in before I give my last impression.
You can find me in Georgia. No. Right now, you can find me at downloadedcontent.com. That's where I'm at right now. And zeninthecar.com will be cranking up, I don't know, whenever I get around to it, It's my legacy, so it'll come around. Of course, you can always find me on the Facebook there, I guess. I don't know, Daniel Louis Crumpton. Also go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, you can find me there, and stuff like that.
Thank you for coming on. You'll be back next week to talk about Joker.
Yeah, man. But we might have to do 2 hours on Joker. I'm not even playing.
Oh no, dude! I can only do one.
We could do two. We could do two.
Nah,
okay.
Sorry.
It's okay, man.
Just real quick, my last impressions. And apparently, you have a book.
Oh yeah, I do, don't I?
You do.
Yeah.
What's your book?
Oh yeah. Then Came the Flood is the one that's out right now. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, all those places. If you like stuff like Man of Steel and Babylon 5, or not Babylon 5, that's a piece of crap. Stargate or Galactica, Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, and like Gladiator type stuff, you dig it. But there's a lot of cool morals, and I don't know. I've never read it.
So if
Then Came the Flood. No, for real. Yeah. It's a book that goes back to 7 days before it goes to the antediluvian days and follows a character named Kima across the world leading up to the Great Flood that we know in all of our myths and legends, and it tries to tie together all of these myths and legends into one cohesive story with a pretty good protagonist that is very near and dear to me. He's a determined old codger with a chip on his shoulders, and he messes stuff up. Good story. It's a good love story too.
I'll have to check it out. To anyone listening, if you haven't seen Man of Steel, please do. I hold it up as maybe the best comic book movie ever made, one of my favorite films ever made. But we will be back next week with Joker. Stay tuned.